Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, we got a lot to talk about. First and foremost, I'm going to have a conversation with you talking about what's happening in the state of Massachusetts, how the governor there, the black woman governor there, has said she has established an advisory on black empowerment. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Also, can we talk about what's happening to get an update about what's happening in Nigeria? We're going to be checking in with my sister, Johanna LeBlanc, to get the latest about the Nigerian presidential election. And I got my brother, Larry Lancaster, who is a comedian, to give us his take on the Chris Rock special that everybody has been talking about. We got that and a whole lot more. Also, we're going to be checking with Ashley Banks from the Griot to talk to us about how the FBI informants were used for Black Lives Matter protests. Should we be expecting COINTELPRO to come back? Yep, we're going to have all this discussion. So stay with us. It's all happening on today's edition of The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. We got a lot to talk about, so let's jump right in. Here's a story that I thought was very interesting, and I wanted to get your take on this very quickly, folks, as we have this discussion, because I think this might be a step forward. And crew, y'all know I need you to check in with me, so make sure y'all get ready to post your comments about this story coming out of the state of Massachusetts. So here's what it is, folks. In Massachusetts, the governor there, Governor Maura Healey, she has decided to establish the Advisory Council for Black Empowerment. And this is a very, very special council. Take a look at this, folks, and I'm going to share with you some of the details about this council. Now, Governor Healey of Massachusetts, she has gone far to say, look, we need to establish this this Advisory Council for Black Empowerment. The council is comprised of 30 Black leaders from across the state, and it will advise Healy on various issues impacting Black Americans, including education, healthcare, and workforce development. Now, the Advisory Council will be co-chaired by NAACP Boston President Tanisha Sullivan and Vice President of Equitable Business Development for the Massachusetts Housing Finance Agency, Mr. Anthony Richards. Now, according to the mayor, she put out this statement saying Massachusetts Black residents make tremendous contributions to our state, but far too often they face systemic barriers that hold them back from opportunity. Our administration is committed to bringing people together and centering equity in all that we do. And that requires ensuring that those who are most impacted by our policy have a seat at the decision-making table. All right, folks, this is the headline here. Take a look at this Advisory Council for Black Empowerment that she just set up. She did it by way of executive order, so it's going to happen. It's happened. But she's bringing all the pieces together, and it made me wonder, folks, is this the start of a different view of how government handles its Black constituents? I want y'all to check in with me, crew. Let me know what your thoughts are about this. Because when I came across the story, I was like, well, this might take us into a place that we've been wanting to go. Will this be the next step? Should we expect, especially, Governor Healey is one of a few Black women governors in the country. But I'm thinking of like a Governor Westmore in Maryland and other Black governors, maybe even mayors, right? Maybe mayors will start to establish an advisory council for Black empowerment. What say you, crew? What do you think of this idea? Is this the way to go when we're talking about Black empowerment? I want you to post your thoughts, share with me what you're thinking about relating to this. And then let's have some more conversation. I want to share with you very quickly a little bit of what the governor said, because she put out this statement. And again, she said she's going to do it by executive order. Here's the other part. that she said centuries of systemic racism in this country have fueled lasting inequities across all realms of society. This is coming actually, I'm sorry, from the Lieutenant Governor Driscoll. Governor Healy and I are committed to not only listening to leaders in the Black community about the work that needs to be done to increase opportunity, but also acting on their recommendations to create real change. Now, I told you that Tanisha Sullivan, who serves as the president of the NAACP chapter in Boston, she's going to be co-chairing. Mr. Anthony Richards going to be there as well. They have a number of Black folks that are out of the economic sector, the business sector, the cultural sector. Michael Bobbitt, executive director for the Mass Cultural Council. A couple of church pastors are sitting on this advisory board, this advisory council. The executive director of the Springfield Housing Authority, Ms. Denise Jordan, she's joining the council. So they have a number of folks from different industries to be a part of this. And they even have, I think this is interesting, John Borders the fourth, who serves as the director of tourism, sports, and entertainment for the city of Boston. And they have Bethia Carter, who serves as the president of the New England Blacks in Philanthropy. So you got all of these different people sitting on this advisory council for the governor in Massachusetts to serve as a council for Black empowerment. Folks, I want you to join us in a conversation. What do you make of this? How do you feel about this? Is this something that you think would help in other cities? And we got a poll going right now on our YouTube chat. We're asking the question, do you support Governor Maura Healey's Advisory Council for Black Empowerment? Is this a good idea? So we're going to share with you some more of the polls, but this is interesting to say the least. Make sure y'all post your comments on this. And Mike V, my guy, you kicking us off this afternoon. Mike, you checked in and said, I'm in Boston, Farajii. And I know all of those folks selected. All right, Mike V, I'm gonna have to make you my unofficial, official voice on the ground there. Mike V, I would love to know the folks that I'm pointing out that are sitting on this list. Are these decent folks? Are these folks that you think will take the struggle, the liberation of Black folks in Massachusetts, particularly in Boston? You think it's going to take it to the next level? Is this a sign of progress, Mike V? I would love to hear what you got to say, bro. So I'm looking at this. I'm thinking to myself, this might be the beginning of something. A Black governor deciding to create an advisory council on Black empowerment while she's in office. Now, it doesn't go into too much depth in terms of, for example, if once she leaves office, does the council still remain or anything of that nature? But it is a start. And I'm just simply asking, do you think this is a good idea? This is an idea that should be duplicated in other states, possibly in other cities. What do you take on that as we have this conversation? Again, Mike V, I would love to hear your take on this, bro, because you're in Boston, you said, and I think that when you bring Black leaders to the table, I know that for a lot of people, I know that some people don't know who's the who in these various industries. So this part of the announcement is good. I think it's a good idea, right? In the sense of having this idea. But I think the other part of it is going to be to kind of introduce people to this, because Black folks, we don't know every Black person that's in these various industries in our respective cities. You know what I mean? We don't know that. We don't know who these folks are unless you work in those particular industries. And so it helps to build the credibility of the council, I think, for us to even have a conversation. Because if these folks don't have some level of connection to the community, then it's going to be harder for you to accept their recommendations. The other part of that, speaking of recommendation, is how are they going to gain the data and the necessary information that they need to create these recommendations, right? And I see, some folks might say, and some of you might be thinking this, But some folks might say, well, we always kind of creating these councils. We always kind of creating these task force. We're always kind of creating some extra board, some extra committee of a group of people to address something, right? But this is how government works, folks. Stuff does not happen overnight. And you need, I am a full-blown supporter of, you get a few voices in the room to represent, right? Because you can't bring everybody into the room. You can't bring thousands of people into the room. So you're going to have to get certain voices. And it's going to be up to the people, i.e. you and me. It's going to be up to us, the constituents, those who live in cities and who have connections and relationships with certain people, like that have the status and the experience, to make sure that they understand how serious this role is. Mike V, you said Black Economic Council of Massachusetts are driving the Massachusetts Public Bank. It would be second in the nation and would be the progressive piece of social infrastructure since Reconstruction. Oh, wow. Okay, Mike. Okay, I appreciate you for bringing up. You're talking about BECMA, Black Economic Council of Massachusetts. They're driving Massachusetts Public Bank. I like that. I like that. Thank you, Mike, for checking in. Also, you said, Farajii, think of the 93 Dream Team with Jordan, Malone, and Stockton and Pippen. That's the equivalent of Governor. Wow. That's the equivalent, Mike? She bringing a dream team of Black intelligentsia and business? Oh, wow. Wow. So a couple of things have to happen, and then we're going to take a quick pause. It seems like that this could be a good idea, and I'm happy that you brought that to the table, Mike, that this could be a good idea if you bring the right people to the table. And that must mean that the governor must have some level of her ears to the streets to recognize, okay, let me put the dream team together. This is big. This is big. And I didn't want this happened just like a couple of weeks ago at the end of February. So it might have been like 2 weeks. It's been probably 2 weeks since this news came out. But we didn't get a chance to talk about it. But I'm thinking I don't want us to kind of skim over this, because this could be a really, really progressive move for Black cities. And again, this is Governor Maura Healey of Massachusetts. But imagine if you're mayor, if you got a Black mayor, like we got, I came from one city that had a Black mayor, came to another city that has a Black mayor. Like, what does the Advisory Council on Black Empowerment, what should that look like in other cities? And possibly Boston serving as the precedent for that. So that's good to know, Mike. That is good to know. Deidre checking in. You said Mike V is on to something today. I did not know that, but wow, right. I'm the same way with you, like you, Deidre. I'm like, wow, that's the dream team. The 93 dream team, the team that just went into the Olympics and just destroyed every team on the planet. If that's what she's put together, then that's what we probably need moving forward. But there needs to be individuals on the council that represents every level of our growth and development and of our condition. We need to have religious leaders, business leaders. We need to have economic scholars and experts. We need to have people who understand community development. We need to have political leaders, of course. We need to have arts and entertainers. This is how you bring folks together. And big shout out to Governor Maura Healey for making this not just up for an amendment, not just putting it on the ballot, but she said this is going to happen, boom, by executive order, and making that happen. Big shout out to that. Folks, we're going to keep our eyes on that. But Mike V, I appreciate you for bringing up that analogy and giving us some insight about what's happening in Boston. And we will certainly see if this is a trend that will spread across the country. We got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we check in with my sister, Johanna LeBlanc. She's going to give us the latest on the impact of that Nigerian presidential election that happened a few days ago and what's next for the country. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now
We have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Very quickly, before we move forward with having our conversation with my sister Johanna, Mike V just wanted to put out one more thing about this council. He was saying that we should thank Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley for helping put all of this together, talking about the advisory council for Black empowerment that's been established by Governor Maura Healey in the state of Massachusetts. So big shout out to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley for staying on top of things and being on the front line as usual, as she has been since she's gotten elected. But thank you, Mike V, for bringing that part up too, because we don't want to miss out that there are people that are advocating for us on a big, big way behind the scenes. So thank you, bro, for bringing that up. All right, folks, we want to switch gears and just talk about some foreign policy and international affairs. Last week, we had a chance to check in with my sister to talk about what's going on in the country of Nigeria. Today, my sister Johanna LeBlanc, who serves as the National Security Law and Foreign Affairs legal commentator, she is back with us to give us an update on the Nigerian presidential election that has happened and that has been called. And we want to welcome her back to to culture here on the Black Star Network. Johanna, thank you so again for being with us. How are you feeling this afternoon?
I am feeling excellent. And thank you so much for having me back on. I've been watching your show when I'm not on it, and you're doing a phenomenal job. So keep up the good work, my brother.
I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that. Thank you, Johanna. All right, so let's talk about this election that has many implications, right? This is, they say that this is one of the most consequential elections over the past 20 to 25 years for the country of Nigeria. And in the presidential election, the last time you were on, you said it was pretty much hasn't been called, but now it has been called. It has been determined who's going to be serving, who's now the president-elect of Nigeria.
Absolutely. So the presidential election has been certified, and the president-elect is Bola Tinubu. And what we have seen is that we have seen a number of world leaders, including the United States, Russia, and China, congratulating the president-elect and indicating their willingness to work with the government. We saw a number of presidents across the African continent as well putting out statements. And obviously the African Union also acknowledged Bola Tinubu as the president-elect of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But what's interesting to note is that in the press release that was published by the State Department, while the State Department congratulated President-elect Bola Tinubu, the State Department also indicated in the letter that, they encourage parties who may have difference of opinions as it relates to the election outcome to do so in a peaceful manner and to utilize the judicial process. So it was like one of those statements read between the lines kind of statements, right? Because it wasn't flat out congratulations, President-elect Bola Tinubu. It was congratulations, but right.
Right.
So I think that the whole world watched the election, and I think some people have some grave concerns about the level of irregularities that occurred during the election. But the
Right.
question is, did those irregularities amount to voter suppression, fraud, and voter disfranchisement? That's the
Yeah.
question. We saw that the IRI and the NDI, National Democratic Institute, put out their preliminary statement finding, because they had individuals on the ground to monitor the elections, including our very own Stacey Abrams, and they did indicate they were gravely concerned about the technology not working on the day of the election, and also some of the irregularities that they noticed. But again, the question is, did those irregularities amount to voter fraud? Well, the opposing parties, both Atiku and Peter Obi, they're heading to court, and they would allow the court of Nigeria to determine whether or not the elections will be reversed. And in my opinion, based on the history of Nigeria, based on my analysis and understanding of the political process in the country, I would say the likelihood of the court reversing the current decision is very slim.
So the thing about, and there are a couple of things about this, Johanna, that I want us to kind of key in on. One is, the president-elect did not get elected by an overwhelming majority. And you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I read that it was like a 37%. Like he didn't even reach the full, like a 50% mark in terms of voter registration. Voter turnout, which also is an indicator that there was low voter turnout for this president, considering his other opponents who had gotten the momentum together. So first, when you talked about that whole voter irregularity and some of the issues that they've been having, even the current president, President Buhari, mentioned that it wasn't they had a lot of issues during this election cycle. He admits to that, but he said that the election still was, counted, people's votes were counted and everything, but there were some major technical issues that the country needs to address. So talk to us about, if a president is coming into power, a person coming into power with not having the full-blown support of the people, how does that fit? Because Nigerian politics, it can be so volatile at times.
Well, the people have already taken to the streets, and I think they're still protesting even today, about the results. But what I can tell you is that about 95 million people registered to vote. And we saw that it did not necessarily translate into actual folks casting their vote on the day of election. So some activists on the ground and some institutions are saying that the reason why we did not see a high voter turnout is not because the folks did not actually vote, is because some of those ballots were just either destroyed or were just not accounted for, and that the numbers that we're seeing is actually not the actual representation of the people who actually were on the ground, were exercising their constitutional right to vote on the day of election. But I think these are some speculation. We're waiting for some final audits by credible institutions to provide the true and accurate data. But President Buhari is committed to working with the president-elect to ensure a smooth transition of power.
That's awesome. Now let's talk about it. And folks, I want to open up the conversation to you, my crew. If y'all got some questions, if you got some comments about this, talking about the implication of the Nigerian presidential election, we would love to hear from you. So post your comments in the chat. So Johanna, that's one of the big things. We can talk about international affairs. And one of the things that I try to do on this show, and we try to do, is to expose people to what's going on, not just what's happening here with Black folks here at home, but also with our people abroad. And I wanted you to kind of give us some insight on this. Why should we think about this? Why does this matter? Is it because we do have a large number of Nigerians here in the States that are contributing to this country, but yet at the same time are trying to make their way to contribute to back home? Why should people, think about the Nigerian presidential election when our presidential stuff has kind of gone all over the place?
I think that first, as Black people, we need to be concerned about what is happening across the African continent. Black people in this country and Black people in Asia, in the Caribbean, we are considered the 6th region of the African continent. That's first. Secondly, what happens in Africa has a direct impact on what happens here in America. And let me explain to you how. During the pandemic, we saw how one infected person all the way in Wuhan, China, right? A place that most of us had never heard of before, led to the collapse of our economy, and led to the death of millions of people right here in America and across the globe. So if that did not open our minds to the idea that we need to remain vigilant, we need to remain engaged and informed on what is happening across the world, I'm not sure what will do it. We have to stay committed. So beyond that, the fact that we are Africans and the continent belongs to us and we're part of the 6th region. But when we talk about insurgency, when we talk about terrorism, and when we talk about trade, when we talk about investments, when we talk about culture, right? We have to consider the African continent as a place to build wealth, as a place to develop relationships, right? Whatever that we are doing here in America, it could be replicated on the continent. Now, I'm not saying everyone should get up and move to the African continent. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there are enormous opportunities for Black people in this country to build wealth. There are opportunities for Black lawyers to go and practice law. Like, for example, during the last show, I talked about the African Continental Free Trade Area. It is an unprecedented trade legislation that will make it easier to trade within Africa. And this legislation is expected to take billions of people out of poverty on the continent. So we're going to need transportation. So as we're moving goods from, let's say, Kenya to Burkina Faso, from South Africa to Cameroon, we're going to need better infrastructure to make that happen. So Black people, there's an opportunity to engage in investment when it comes to the rebuilding of Africa's infrastructure, right? When it comes to disputes will arise out of this trade agreement, right? Black lawyers have an opportunity to be a part of this process, to be considered as potential attorneys that will represent either states or parties when these litigation were to arise. So these are just some of the few examples, but again, we cannot not pay attention to what's happening on the African continent because it's one world. Yes, we're divided by borders, we're divided by different time zones, but at the end of the day, it's one world, one people.
I love how you said that, Johanna. I love it. All right, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's have more conversation with Johanna LeBlanc, and let's have more conversation with you as we talk about the affairs of the Nigerian presidential election and why you should care about it. Folks, stay with us. More discussion up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome back to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've been checking in with Johanna LeBlanc. Johanna is serving as the National Security Law and Foreign Affairs legal commentator, and she's joining us here on the culture today to give us the latest about the Nigerian presidential election that happened just a few days ago, and more importantly, why we need to care about it, because there are major implications of this. Johanna, again, thank you so much. I want to bring you back into the frame. Let's talk about this part of it, because what you laid out before the pause is absolutely true, Johanna. It's like, there are untapped opportunities for Black folks in this country to take advantage of in Nigeria. Now, the big concern that people do have, and even in my crew, they talking about it right now in the chat, is this concern of corruption, criminality, that we all have to contend with, not just with governments over there, but with the governments across the waters. And so some folks are wondering, like how do you break through all of the red tape? How do you get to a place, especially if you're a business owner or if you're just an individual that want to build this relationship, but you do have to, it is a different governmental system in Africa than it is in America, right? So for Black folks who may feel inspired to want to branch out, to go across the waters, to build relationships, to start e-commerce opportunities, how does that happen given the corruption, given the differences of how governments work? How do you break through all of that?
Listen, I think that before anyone goes to a country and decide as to whether or not they're going to engage in business, there are a few things they have to look at, right? One, is there political stability in that country, right? When you look at countries like Ghana, Nigeria, and South Africa, and countless others, we can say yes to that question. Two, you look at, is the judiciary independent? If litigation were to arise, will I get a fair shot in court, right? And I think there are numerous countries across the African continent we can say yes to that, right? And lastly, you look at to see what about safety? What about peace and security in the country, right? And again, there are numerous countries on the continent we can say yes to that. And there are some where there are challenges, right? The issue of corruption is indeed a thing, and corruption is not unique to the African continent. No. Corruption is a global phenomenon here in the United States and in the Middle East and all over the world. So once you're able to say yes to all of those questions, right, then you connect with the right organizations, the right institutions to make things happen. Now, I understand the average person here in this country, in America, may not have direct access to government bodies or entities or the private sector here across the African continent. Now, there are organizations here in America that will help facilitate, like you have, organizations such as the ADDI, the African Diaspora Development Institute, which is ran by Ambassador Ericana Chimbu Kwao, She served as a former AU ambassador to the United States. She has enormous contacts across the African continent. In her organization, the role of the organization is specifically to connect African Americans to the African continent for the purpose of commerce. So there are resources out there. You just have to do your research, and your mind and spirit has to be in the right place. And you have to decolonize your mind as to everything you have learned about Africa. You have to unlearn those things and learn the African continent for yourself. Will there be challenges? Absolutely. But is Africa a viable place for business? 100%. As someone who has lived and worked and who have maintained very close contacts and relationships across the African continent, absolutely.
I like the part you said, we got to decolonize our minds, because that's what a little brainwashing, Johanna. We need a little brainwashing in a good way. Real Brooklyn checked in and said, look, I do have a question regarding Africa's political woes. Will Africa ever be the great continent it used to be before slavery? How will corruption be eradicated in order for the continent to be great?
First and foremost, we have to look at the African continent is comprised of 55 nation states. So it's not just one policy, one governance for the whole continent. Each country has its own government system. Each country has its own ideals of what democracy looks like. Each country has its own unique history. Some of the countries were colonized by France, by Britain, by Italy, and so on. But we also have to realize is that the African continent is a relatively young continent. Most of the countries in Africa gained their independence in the 50s and the 60s. Look at with South Sudan being the youngest country on the continent, which gained its independence in 2012. Look at the United States of America. We've had over 200 years of independence. And look at the challenges that we face when it comes to our democracy, when it comes to our economy, when it comes to race relations in America. We've made some progress, right?
Right.
But it has taken some time, right? When you look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, right? That wasn't too far ago, right? So it's the same thing with the African continent. We need to allow these countries, these relatively new countries, the opportunity and the time to build their own democracy. Ghana just celebrated 60-something year of independence. That is a baby country. It's going to take time. But I do believe that we have a number of leaders on the African continent who understand the mission, who are committed to ensuring that the African continent maintain its global dominance at the world stage. And I think that the African Continental Free Trade Area trade agreement is a game changer for the African continent.
So speaking of young, and I'm glad that you brought that up and putting that into a context and a comparison, because, you know, as for some of us, we often don't think about the fact that the way America is, America is still being kind of tweaked in terms of what they call the American experiment. And I'm sure you heard that in your line of work, that this is all still an experiment. Like there is no definitive way of how democracy should be, because it's a hybrid system of government. But the other part of it is, you talked about young. You're talking about Nigeria to be one of the youngest countries, but you also have some of the youngest people that serves as the majority of the country. I remember from the last conversation that we had, you said 18 years old. You're talking about 18 to 35 years old. And it sounds like what we have here in this country, where you have a cadre of young people who are pushing for a shift to be made in how government does its work for the people, right? And that's what we're seeing in America. Talk to us a little bit about this cadre of young voters that came out to vote. I don't know how many came out to vote for this current president-elect, but I know for his opposition, Mr. Obi, I believe is his name, they were behind him. So how does the next generation play into this? How will Nigeria respond to that? How will the world respond to that?
I think Africa's greatest resources it is its youth. And I think in particular Nigeria's greatest resources is definitely its youth. We know the average age in Nigeria is 18. And what we're seeing is that the young people, they get it. They understand the history of their country, understand where they want to go. And they are engaged in the political process. They are engaged in the development of their nation, and because they want to see change, they want to see a better and brighter Nigeria. So when I think of, in spite of the challenges that exist in Africa, in particular in Nigeria, what gives me hope is the young people. What gives me hope is their commitment to change and their commitment to be resilient, to not give up, in spite of being in the face of injustice and adversity and other challenges. So I'm positive, I'm optimistic, and I'm excited about the future of Nigeria and so many other countries across the continent because of the youth population.
No, I'm excited as well. And my hope is that Black youth from Nigeria can learn from Black youth in America and vice versa, right? On political engagement, political activism. I mean, we need to have a surge of engagement in this country from young people. And so, you know, to see that happen in Africa the way it did, the young people coming out, and then that young people are still saying that, look, they're going to hold Mr. President-elect to the fire of accountability. That's the type of energy that we need to have on this side as well. So it's interesting, and I'm so happy that you were able to share some of your expertise and insight on this, because it's very important for us to connect the dots and bridge the gap between what's happening here and what's happening across the waters with our people there. Johanna LeBlanc, thank you so much for the work that you're continuing to do, and more importantly, thank you for joining us here on The Culture this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. Keep up the good work, my brother.
Thank you, sis. Thank you, sis. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk about FBI informants and the Black Lives Matter movement protests. Are we looking at COINTEL possibly coming back? Y'all know what COINTEL is, right? The counterintelligence program that was instituted back in the 50s to where agents were used to infiltrate Black organizations under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover. This sounds about right. We're going to be checking in with the Capitol Hill correspondent for the Griot, Ashley Banks, to get the latest about what this situation is all about. And of course, we want you to join us in a conversation. So stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
hatred on the streets. A horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I truly appreciate you for joining us this afternoon as we have these big conversations. All right, the next conversation we wanted to have is about FBI informants and infiltration. Folks, do y'all remember that great historic program? And I'm saying great not in terms of wonderful, but that historic program called the Counterintelligence Program that was coming from the FBI years ago, where it was under the leadership and direction of former FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who decided to infiltrate Black organizations all across the country, from the Panthers to the Nation of Islam to the SCLC and many other organizations that were fighting for the liberation of Black people in this country. He decided to infiltrate them with agents, so much so that his efforts were somewhat effective in disrupting the progress of a lot of these organizations. Now, according to the records, that program, the COINTELPRO program, has been disbanded and broken up, or has it? This latest conversation that we plan to have with Miss Ashley Banks, who serves as the Capitol Hill correspondent for the Griot, can tell us it may not be totally scrapped. Ashley, thank you again for joining us this afternoon. How are you, sis?
Hi there. I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Farajii?
I'm good. But this story is disturbing, Ashley. I gotta say, you wrote a piece for the Griot talking about FBI informants. It has been determined that there was a paid informant to sow discord during the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests. Okay, are we back with COINTELPRO? I mean, what's going on with this?
Yeah, that's what it looks like to journalist Trevor Aronson. So he writes for The Intercept, and he's the one who got his hands on this undercover footage and documents from the FBI detailing that this man named Adam Windecker II, who's actually an ex-felon, was paid by the FBI essentially to infiltrate the 2020 protests in Denver, Colorado, following the death of George Floyd. And so some of the things that he uncovered in his podcast, Alphabet Boys, it's not shocking, but it's highly disappointing. Like you said, we were told that the COINTEL program was disbanded, but it appears that the FBI is still using certain illegal tactics to infiltrate Black organizations like the Black Lives Matter organization in 2020. And so when talking to Trevor, he connected me with somebody named Zeb Hall, who was an activist at the protest, and he happened to get connected with Adam Windecker. So Adam Windecker did this thing where he gained the trust of the people around him. And anytime somebody suspected that he could be suspicious or was an officer, he used an FBI tactic called snitch jacketing. And so essentially, anytime somebody would accuse him of being an FBI informant or a cop, he would then turn them in and try to create suspicion around somebody else so that he would not be found out. So anyway, during the time that he was infiltrating the Black Lives Matter protests, He came across with Zeb Hall and a couple of other people and tried to convince them to assassinate the Attorney General, Phil Weiser. And so, yeah. And so Zeb Hall was just like, this doesn't make any sense. He told me he feared for his life because he felt like Adam Windecker was a scary individual. He carried pictures of ISIS fighters in his back pocket, had loads of guns in his car, always talked about how he killed people. And so a lot of people kind of like feared this man. And so essentially, Zeb knew that Adam had his contact information, knew where he lived, because Adam, once again, gained the trust of all the protesters and basically said, if you're ever arrested, let me get your information so that I can reach out to your family and your friends on your behalf. And so Zeb has a child and he has family that he wanted to protect, but he told Adam, no, I do not want to carry out this plot to kill the Attorney General. This makes absolutely no sense. How is this bringing justice to what happened to George Floyd and other Black people who look like me or have gone through certain situations like, George Floyd, police brutality cases. And so then Adam kind of forced Zeb to then purchase the gun that would be used in the plot to assassinate the Attorney General. And the reason why Zeb had to get it was because Adam is an ex-felon and could not buy the gun. And so Zeb did end up purchasing the gun. Obviously, the assassination did not take place, but Zeb bought the gun and he was later arrested by FBI agents and was sentenced to 3-year probation. He can also face other charges, but at this time he's working with an attorney and hoping that it doesn't go further than that. But speaking with the journalist Trevor Aronson, who I said earlier, he's the one that was able to uncover all of this. He told me that this crime is a baseless crime. He said if it weren't for the FBI, none of this would have happened. The FBI created this whole plot to kill the Attorney General. The FBI is the one that gave Zeb the money to purchase this gun. And he's just like, if the FBI didn't coerce Zeb to do any of these things, none of this would have taken place in the first place. And so Trevor is saying that at this time, the FBI has way too much power. Yes, COINTELPRO was allegedly disbanded, but essentially he was saying to me after 9/11 took place, FBI was given more power in order to prevent another 9/11 from happening. And he's saying that the agency needs more congressional oversight and their powers need to be limited because these things cannot continue to happen.
So, all right. So I got so many questions running through my head around this story, Ashley. It's a lot of connecting dots here. But first and foremost, what happened to Michael Adam Windecker at this point?
Nothing. And so I spoke with Trevor Aronson, and he said he reached out to Michael to get comments, to get his side of the story, and hasn't heard anything. We just know that he was a paid informant. So it's not clear as to what would happen to him. Obviously, he wouldn't face any consequences because if he's doing what the FBI is asking him to do, then he's doing his job.
Is this a Black man, though?
Oh, no. Adam Windecker is a white man. Yeah, a white man.
And so, I mean, most likely he's probably out of the city into another situation. He might be used for another plan. But this was just 2020. All of this went down in just maybe 3 years ago. And as far as you know, and as far as Trevor is speaking about, like this form of infiltration, this is still happening, right? Or is it not?
It's still happening. As of right now, this is the one case that Trevor says he was able to uncover, but it wouldn't be surprising if there were other instances. I will tell you, when I went to Minneapolis to cover the George Floyd protest following his death, I spoke with a lot of activists and they were telling me similar things. They were saying to me, all of the crime that's happening, the chaos that's being created at these protests, they were like, these are undercover cops. These aren't activists. And of course, it hasn't been proven. It could be a thing, may not be a thing, but that has yet to be proven. But I do remember speaking to certain activists about this. So when I wrote this story for the Griot, those same activists reached out to me and were just like, see, I knew these things were happening during that time. And so it's going to be interesting. Zeb Hall and Trevor Aronson do believe that we're going to hear more cases like this. I don't know if you recall, but in Minneapolis, there were fires that were started. I remember the police department there was lit on fire. And activists were saying, they were just like, we didn't do this. We didn't do this. And there were like several reports around the nation of just implants, people coming out of nowhere and just starting chaos and then leaving and no one seeing them ever again. And so it will be interesting to see if there was an entire operation that was taking place around the country at the hands of the FBI to infiltrate Black Lives Matter.
Are there any well, you know what? We got to take a quick pause. Let me hold my question because we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we'll continue the conversation with Ashley Banks from the GRIO to talk to us about an paid FBI informant who was used to disrupt the 2020 Black Lives Matter protest around the killing of George Floyd. I would love to get your take on this, crew. Share with me and Ashley your thoughts around this, and let's continue the conversation. COINTELPRO 2.0, is it back? Well, it sounds like it never was disbanded. We'll continue the discussion. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punching! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape. With me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. We've been talking to the Capitol Hill correspondent for the GRIO, Miss Ashley Banks, to give us the latest around a story she's worked on about an FBI informant who was paid to disrupt Black Lives Matter protests back in 2020, and how that person can no longer be seen at this point, and giving us the story around this very, very familiar situation we all know too well, that Black organizations have been the target of infiltration for many, many years, especially coming from the federal government. And so this is so reminiscent of what we have been reading about, and in some cases experiencing, as we look at what's been happening with the COINTELPRO program of the FBI. Ashley, I'm looking at my crew, some of the comments from the crew, and they're like, why are we surprised? Let me just share with you a couple of folks are saying. Let me hear it. Sandy, you said that is why I would never believe the tactic hasn't been used in recent times There's a reason why these black and brown groups implode, right? That we're seeing this happen time and time again. And I think that it's we as black folks, we want to believe that things have moved on, that we've gotten past certain things, even though I will say, Ashley, we haven't had any very substantial conversation about race relations or in this country to the point where both parties, black and white people, can walk away saying, you know what, I learned something. I think I'm going to do something different. We haven't had that level of conversation yet. And then when it comes to black organizations fighting for liberation and justice and freedom, justice and equality, we're seeing this still. There's no way in the world that all of these things are happening and then we're seeing very little progress being made. And sometimes even our people, us as a people, we tend to believe, oh, they're not doing it right. Not taking into consideration that there are forces, i.e. the federal government, the FBI, there are forces that have prevented us from making the type of progress and gains that we want. That this isn't just because we're not putting in enough effort or enough work. No, there are forces around us that have created the circumstances for our own detriment and failure. So speak to us about folks aren't surprised. I'm not surprised, but it is disturbing to say the least.
Yeah. So comments from my story, and I did a video package that went on the Griot television as well last week. And in the comments, literally saying the same thing that Sandy's saying the same thing that you're saying, Farajii. It's not surprising. It's just disappointing that this is still taking place. Instead of the FBI or other organizations in this country using their power to prevent police brutality, to prevent the next George Floyd from being killed at the hands of police, they are using their power to divide the Black community, to make the Black community look terrible, to prevent our efforts for just simply wanting justice. And it's despicable. Like you said, Farajii, so many people want to believe the government, they want to believe that agencies like the FBI are truly on our side and want to see us win, want to see justice served. But there are issues that took place back then when we saw Malcolm X, what happened to him, what happened to Martin Luther King Jr., what happened to the Black Panther Party. We see these things repeating. And it's just truly unfortunate. But we do have people like Trevor Aronson and even Zeb Hall, who are simply speaking out against this, trying to get their word out, trying to create a platform to expose what the FBI did during the summer of 2020 to bring about change. They're getting the attention of congressional members and hoping that Congress actually passes a law that stops the FBI from having the power that they have so that they can stop infiltrating organizations like the Black Lives Matter movement and other Black organizations from trying to move forward and trying to put a stop to issues like police brutality.
Let me ask you this, Ashley. I keep thinking about that great movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, where our brother Daniel Kaluuya played Fred Hampton. And I'm wondering, do you think the next generation, based upon your conversations with activists and organizers on the ground, do they really understand the gravity, the seriousness, and the weight of what they're involved in that could lead to them being used as part of a plot to take down a particular person or the organization, or even try to go as far as to be a part of an assassination attempt? Like, do young people, do young organizers and activists understand that? Do you think they have an understanding of that history, especially the Black ones, understanding of that history, that you really do have to keep your eyes open, that the person that you're sitting next to in that meeting hyping you up or saying, yeah, man, you know what we should be doing? We should bomb somebody's house. That's going to kick off the movement. Like, do they understand that? Because I've been in circles with a lot of different activists and organizers, and I'm always keeping my head on a swivel, Ashley, because I don't know who these jokers know. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know who your network is. I don't know how you got here. We all assume that you're here on righteous intentions. But do you think the next generation understand that?
Yeah, no, from the people that I've interviewed, it seems like they have the right level of skepticism. Other generations, they're highly intelligent. They have an understanding of history. These people are bold when they're going out there and they're fighting for, civil rights, making sure that, people that look like you and I, Farajii, are seeing justice served. They have an understanding of what, the older generations went through, and they want to make sure it's not repeated. Some people, sure, it can be naive no matter what generation you're in. But for the most part, it appears that the people that I've spoken to, at least, have an understanding of what's at risk when they enter, these demonstrations or they get involved in certain organizations. They're well aware of what's taking place.
I hope they are. Latrice checked in. Latrice is a new watcher. Welcome, Latrice, to the culture on the Black Star Network here on YouTube. You said, I'm new here. Hello, everybody. This story confirms what I've suspected all along. Like, we know these things, and to Latrice's point, we know that this happens, but I think there's a different level of there's a different response that's required, because you can know something and still be passive in your response. But to know that this happens, how do we deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, that's
the question I'm having. Like, how do you handle that? How do you go into a space, that the FBI could be watching, that anybody can be watching. They're going to be agitators and infiltrators. Like, how do we handle that? Especially given the fact that, guess what? Our struggle for liberation hasn't stopped, Ashley. We still, we look at Tyree Nichols. There are going to be other cases, unfortunately, until some things start to change. But how do we prepare for that?
Mm-hmm. I guess the best thing is, if you're part of an organization, just strategizing, like you're saying here, the way you and I are talking about this, simply just making sure everybody's on notice and keeps their head on a swivel when they are attending demonstrations. If you see something that looks like it's out of the ordinary, speak up. Tell the people you're there with so that you guys can keep an eye on that person. Make note of it. If that person keeps showing up at different demonstrations and it looks like they're instigating or starting problems, speak up and try to do something about it. Don't have to be violent. Don't even really have to confront that person, but speak to an authority, speak to whoever you think is necessary to have that person removed. But I will say, aside from, the FBI infiltrating the 2020 Denver BLM protests, in Minneapolis, FBI informants aren't the only ones, right, who are instigating these situations. I remember actually speaking with an officer in Minneapolis there, the press and activists. We were walking to a protest, and I remember a couple of officers lying to us, telling us that they were about to enclose the protest and about to throw gas canisters and do all these different things if people didn't move, because I guess they were breaking curfew. And they were essentially lying and trying to use a scare tactic to move everyone away. And so a couple of journalists informed the activists, and nothing happened. Literally nothing happened. But the sense of urgency the officers were giving us was almost like we were in danger, like our lives were in danger, that we could be victims if we attended and covered this protest. But it's like there are so many different avenues, so many different sources that can really prevent these efforts from prevailing. It's just really upsetting.
So and now that this story has come out, what is going to be the response either from the federal government? I mean, obviously the FBI can't correct themselves, right? I mean, they're going to need to be, some heads need to be rolling. So what happens now? Who is going to hold the FBI accountable?
So right now it's on Congress. And there are a couple of congressional members who have seen or listened to this podcast, and they're in awe right now. They're calling on the FBI to be transparent. They're like, if these allegations are true, if this is what really took place in 2020, the FBI needs to answer to the public and let them know, why did you do this? Why are you allowing this to happen? These tactics are illegal and they're infringement on Americans' constitutional rights, and it needs to stop. Also, Trevor Aronson called out Congress and said, hey, it is your responsibility to enact laws to oversee the FBI and make sure the FBI is not extending beyond its authority. And right now it is. And like I told you earlier, after 9/11 took place, the FBI was granted certain powers to be able to make sure that they could prevent another 9/11 from taking place. But they're using that authority to infiltrate organizations like the Black Lives Matter organization, and it just makes no sense because it's not necessary. There aren't terrorists and BLM that are trying to wreak havoc on this country. And if there were, go for those people and make sure they're dealt with. But dealing with, we'll call them innocent activists, right, who are just protesting the death of George Floyd, they're not preparing for a terrorist attack. They're not preparing for domestic terrorism. Instead, the FBI informant was preparing for a domestic terrorist situation. And that's just not right. And so right now, the ball is in the court of Congress to do something about it.
Let me tell you something, Ashley. I'm going to keep it 101 with you. If they couldn't do nothing about January 6th, I don't think we should hold our breath for them to do anything about this situation. They couldn't stop January the 6th from happening, Ashley. They couldn't stop that high level of domestic terrorism. We're talking about a Black Lives Matter protest in Denver, Colorado, where those protesters never ran up on the Capitol of Colorado or in City Hall in Denver, climbing the walls.
Right. And I mean, the government kind of knew about this ahead of time when it came to January 6th. There was talks.
And I bet you, Mr. Windecker was probably there for that.
Well, I don't know about that. Wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised. Let me just say that. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. All right, Ashley. Well, I truly, truly thank you so much for this phenomenal report, for bringing this back to light for so many people. I mean, we weren't surprised, but it's always good to keep us posted on these things. And certainly, I appreciate you for this report. And we'll certainly circle back to you when you have other reports to share. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Farajii. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Ashley Banks, Capitol Hill correspondent for The Griot, checking in here on The Culture. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk about Chris Rock. There has been so much said. Big Brother Roland did his piece on it. Other folks done it. But let me just say, y'all folks, I'm from Baltimore. It was a whole different situation. And the response that I got from the people in Baltimore has been crazy, from those who thought it was appropriate to those who didn't think it was appropriate. We're going to be checking in with one Baltimore comedian, Larry Lancaster, to give us his take, and more importantly, to have the larger conversation about crossing the line when on stage. We'll have that discussion up next, so stay with us. That conversation comes at you right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
It's
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back for our final conversation. Let's talk about the thing that everybody has been talking about, which is about the Chris Rock special, Selective Outrage, where the high-profile comedian decided to take his brand of comedy on the road to Baltimore. Yeah, he went to the Hippodrome Theater in Baltimore, the home of actress Jada Pinkett Smith, who is, of course, the wife of Will Smith. And he decided to share his truth about Jada and so many other issues. Take a look at what he said.
I know what happened to me, getting smacked by Suge Smith. Everybody knows. Everybody fucking knows. Yes, it happened. I got smacked like a year ago. Fucking last week, I got smacked in the fucking Oscars by this motherfucker. And people like, did it hurt? It still hurts. I got Summertime ringing in my ear. Fucking drums, please. But I'm not a victim, baby. You will never see me on Oprah or Gayle crying. You will never see it. Never gonna happen. I couldn't believe it, and I love Men in Black. No. It's never gonna happen. No. Fuck that shit. I took that hit like Pacquiao, motherfucker. I took it like motherfucking Pacquiao, okay? Shit, man. Did it hurt? Yeah, motherfucker, it hurt. And people are, well, you guys are fighting all the time. We're not fighting. First of all, I know you can't tell on camera. Will Smith is significantly bigger than me. We are not the same size, okay? We are not. This guy, Will Smith does movies with his shirt off. You've never seen me do a movie with my shirt off. If I'm in a movie getting open heart surgery, I got on a sweater. Will Smith played Muhammad Ali in a movie. You think I auditioned for that part? He played Muhammad Ali. I played Pookie in New Jack City. Pookie, motherfucker. I played a piece of corn in Pootie Tang. Shit, even in animation, this motherfucker's bigger. I'm a zebra, he's a shark.
Wow, there it is. Chris Rock, Selective Outrage. Now, it was a live streaming Netflix event that garnered millions of views of people tuning in and millions of opinions about what the intent was. Let me bring in my brother Larry Lancaster, who is a comedian. He's been in the game for a long time, and he's also from Baltimore. What the...
I don't know why you just bust out laughing at the sight of me.
Hey, bro, I know exactly your face. Like your face, bro. Your face. I know you've been hearing this. I know your phone has been blowing up, brother. So I'm first and foremost, I thank you for your few minutes with us this afternoon. But what do you make of all of this, bro? You're a comedian, you're from Baltimore. So here's what I've been hearing. One is that he used Baltimore because not only did he take jabs, of course, at Jada, but he took jabs at the city, talking about how, historic Black community of Cherry Hill and some other places. But he used Baltimore to prop himself up and to have this big response to what happened to him a year ago. So what do you make of this, bro? Was this necessary?
Well, first of all, yes, it was very necessary because remember, he never said anything about the whole incident the entire time. He didn't hit Will Smith back. Of course, so this is him getting his lick back. So for anybody who's saying it was unnecessary, I mean, what was he supposed to do? He's fighting back the only way he knows how. The only way he knows that he could possibly win. He just spent 10 minutes self-deprecating, saying why he didn't hit Will Smith back. First of all, he understands that's a losing battle. So he went to his tool and his skill set, his comedy, and that's how he defends himself. So that's what he did. As far as picking the city of Baltimore, Baltimore is a real town. So either they like you or they don't. And so I think even as much as the fact that it's Jada's hometown, it's the fact that Baltimore is a real town and they're going to give it to you straight. And I think he wanted to know, he could have done it in LA. He could have done it anywhere in the world. He chose Baltimore because he knows it's real people. And if they like what you're saying, you're going to know that. And if they don't, you're going to know that. And he took the risk of live streaming it. So he couldn't edit it and make it nice and pretty and neat. So he actually risked a lot.
When you're talking about that level of risk, Brother Larry, you're live streaming it, putting it out there that this is going to be your response. Then not only did he talk about, of course, Oscar slap, he talked about abortion. He talked about some very, very sensitive topics, race issues, of course, which Chris Rock has normally done. This is not like outside of his wheelhouse.
Right.
So he took all of that and he put it all on the line for a big paycheck. People are saying, oh, he took his power and turned it into profit. He took his pain and turned it into profit. For those underlying things, is that, I guess, like you said, is that the best way to handle it?
I think it was just a matter of redemption. Let me redeem myself. Let me take my time. Let me make sure this set is as good as I think it can possibly be. And that's the other thing people don't understand. It may take a year, 18 months just to get a set down pat. They're talking about, well, he should have said something right away. Yeah, he could have said something right away. But really, in essence, if he had done that, it would have sounded like a gripe session. The jokes wouldn't have been tried and tested and worked out. And that's what you have to do in the world of comedy. You have to test these jokes. You have to try them out in small nightclubs where people don't necessarily know you or don't care that you're Chris Rock. And that's how Chris Rock prepares for a special. So that takes time. And you don't want to come into it hot where you're just being so emotional. And as you can see, even a year later, it's still an emotional topic for him.
Very emotional topic. We're also
one more thing. He needs to update his regional research because Cherry Hill now is waterfront property. It's no longer the hood. So I don't know when and I know that's something that people do when they come to town, like, where's the hood? So he must have got that information 10 to 15 years ago, the last time he was here, because Cherry Hill is different. Right.
Hey, look. Hey, look, when I saw it, I was like, Cherry Hill?
Right. You mean we're under the Under Armour headquarters now? Like, no, that's
that joint is a damn shoe factory.
Right. That's waterfront property now, brother. So
Right. You got to come a little further inland, bro. Come a little further inland to the city.
He just said Greenmount Avenue, certain parts of McCullough. I just bought a house on McCullough, and man, I'm waiting for the suite. I'm waiting to see white people jogging their dogs. I'm like, yes, property values up. I'm like,
right. So talk to us about this. Like, does this dead the whole thing? Because it was so hard, so cutting. It was so hard edge, and I mean, he called Jada out of her name, right? Like. Some black women I've heard had some real issues. Talk about his take on abortion. Like, he brought in other elements. It just didn't sound like a black man talking about the pain that another black man has caused them. It became very, very disrespectful in the sense of the language that he used and how he was something out. Now, is this the creative license that we should give comedians, or should there be some checks and balances on this?
Well, it depends on what your perspective is. I really don't like black people arguing in mixed company. Right. They don't always get along, but they don't go public with it necessarily. I think it's a couple of things at play here. So socially, first of all, he's a comedian. Y'all done heard the word, the bitch word before. Y'all didn't, so, you done heard comedians do jokes about abortions. Corey Holcomb is one of them, and he's one of the best to ever do it, right? Chris Rock sat still. He never said anything about what happened while everyone else talked. This was his chance, like it or love it, for him to have his say about what happened, and rightfully so. He sat by, let everybody say what they was going to say. I would have done this. Yeah, hit me, boy. They'd have had to go to a commercial real quick. He sat and listened to all of that. And then he finally came out, had his say. So as far as him calling Jada a B, comedians do that all the time. And a lot of these people who had something to say, your favorite rapper does it. And I don't hear y'all talking about that. So we, again, selective outrage, right? And so we overlook all these things. And then when people complain about the music, that's just them telling their truth. We got women, we got these female rappers who are now adapting this male energy, and now they're taking the place of the misogynistic role, and no one's saying anything about that. Again, selective outrage. So I think Chris Rock, and here's the thing. He said he referred to Will Smith as a bitch 50 times. And no one said anything about that. And he called Jada, from what I understand, a bitch one time, and now it's the end of the world for black women. I think we become too super sensitive, and we need to understand that, listen, man, he's a comic, and there's nothing that you guys haven't heard before.
Right. And I think that part, and that part that he's talked about, he's saying, look, I only brought up stuff that was already on the internet about their marital problem.
Right.
Jada hurt him more than he hurt. Than he can be hurt by anybody by sleeping with his son's best friend.
Right.
And putting it out there and saying, why would you do that?
Right. And I don't hear a lot of women talking about that issue. The fact that, why would you do that? But that's a whole separate issue. But, I think it's just the fact, and I'm not justifying anybody calling black women bees, but come on, you got to look at it in the proper context. And so the context is, he's a comic. He was angry. He sat still. And I think he blames Jada as much as he blames Will for the slack. And that's the other thing. I think that's why he went at Jada so hard. And to be honest, most of us did the same thing. We kind of felt like she kind of wound Will up. And what that was is it showed the frustration on both men. Both men were going through trauma publicly, and this is how they responded. Will Smith smacked Chris Rock, not for really what Chris Rock said, but for all the things everyone else said that he couldn't get to. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. So Chris got that smack for all the other people who said something about their open relationship and the fact that she had, sexual relations with the son's friend, and the fact that she had sexual relations with someone that was so young, and that this young man was going through a troubled time. He got smacked for all the things everyone else said. And so now Chris Rock haven't had to hear all the things that everyone else said. This is his anger. This is his trauma being released. And so that's what I got from it.
I want to key in on that. I'm glad you brought that up, Brother Larry, because I need to key in on that. We got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we'll continue the conversation with comedian Larry Lancaster as we talk about Chris Rock's special, Selective Outrage. And of course, I'm going to bring you into the discussion. So stay with us, crew. We got a lot to get to in the final few moments of the culture right here on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, we've been talking to comedian Larry Lancaster, getting his take on the Chris Rock special Selective Outrage that was broadcasted live on Netflix this past weekend. And Larry, I want to bring you back into the frame. And the reason I enjoy talking to you about things like this is because you can kind of give us some perspective on it, right? Some real understanding. You're not just trying to be funny, you're trying to be thoughtful.
Right.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think a lot of times comedians make the mistake of thinking if I don't say anything funny, then I can't contribute to the conversation. And that's not always the case. And as you can see, most of the great comics, they shied away from that. And they still had something thought-provoking to say. Richard Pryor, George Carlin, the Chappelles of the world, even the Chris Rock, old Chris Rock. And I think him, aside from the diatribe that he had for Will and Jada, he kind of got back to that old Chris Rock, that bigger and black and bringing the pain, Chris Rock.
Right, and more of a social commentary that he provided, giving us some context and another view to look at things, which I think is important.
Right.
But I want to key in on something that you just said, bro, and I think this is important. You and I have had off-camera discussions about this many times, talking about trauma. Mm-hmm. You have worked in spaces within the correctional facilities and in schools where you have seen Black boys growing up to be Black men who have not been healed from trauma.
Right.
And I'm wondering, by the way Chris did the way he did, even by what Will did, does it speaks to the importance of Black men learning how to deal with this trauma? And here's why I'm saying this. I saw over the weekend the movie Creed, and everybody should see Creed. I think it's a very, very good film, right? But the thing about it is it explored this idea of trauma, past pain, masculinity, all of those themes. And I'm wondering, could this be, and again, he got to speak his truth, but for those of us who are on the outside of it and say, oh, he just turned his pain into profit, or, he went in on Jada, like, could there be a lesson that young Black men and other Black people can learn about Black men handling their trauma from this situation? Can we look at it like that?
Of course. First of all, the trauma piece is that we need to do a better job of gaining more emotional intelligence. And what I mean by that is most of the time Black men feel a myriad of emotions, but generally it shows up as just anger. We feel hurt, we feel abandonment, we feel resentment, we feel disappointment, we feel insecurity, but most of those things only show up as anger. And sometimes we don't necessarily take the time to realize, acknowledge all the different emotions that we're feeling, and then anger is the result. And that's why you got a lot of brothers sitting in the penitentiary right now, because they made a decision, not because they was thugs, not because they was gangsters, not because they was killers, but because they made a decision based on where they were in an emotional state. And the only thing about that is once you do that, you're not going to always feel that emotion. So you've made a decision in an emotional time, right? But what about tomorrow when you no longer feel that way? So you've rolled down the block and shot somebody, or you beat somebody up because you were angry and emotional. But then when that emotion goes away, the damage is still done. So we definitely need to do a better job of this. And this is where I think the term toxic masculinity comes into play. And I don't even like to use those terms. I think a lot of that stuff is just bullshit to effeminize Black men. But that's a whole nother conversation. But there is something to be said about the way that we respond, particularly to each other. And I say that because I just saw a clip of Will Smith speaking about an actor who spat on him twice, right? A white actor who spat on him twice. And he was saying that he reserved his response because he said to himself, the character he was playing, which was a slave, couldn't call for the director. And so I thought that was interesting because I thought like, okay, you have this type of restraint for someone who's doing the worst thing they could ever do to you, right? Which is spit on you twice. And it was an ad lib. It wasn't like it was in the script and he could see it coming. So the actor took it upon himself to spit on one of the most recognizable and top selling actors in the history of filmmaking. And you really had no consequence. But you can smack another black man in front of the world on one of the most televised nights in TV history. And I also thought that it was something to say about no matter what our status level is and how much money we have, it also dictates how we talk and how we treat each other. And when we talk about lives mattering, we are way quicker to lash out at each other than we are to our white counterparts, because we know that he wouldn't have been, if he had smacked a white actor or white comedian on the Oscar stage, he wouldn't have been allowed to go back to his seat and then finish watching the show. And then
they're able to accept an award the few moments after.
The penalty would have been a lot harsher.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to get to a couple of crew members. They checking in. Mimi, you said, Mimi D726, you said, black men, y'all got to start protecting black women and stop laughing at these degrading punchlines, which is across the board, right? Black women are always the butt of the jokes from other black women and from black men. So I think it's across the board. Right. Thank you, Mimi. Corinna, my sister, you said Chris has taken more heat over the whole ordeal than Will, and he was the one that was physically assaulted. So I guess that gives him permission to speak his truth. That's one of the big things. Corinna, thank you so much. Janae, you said exactly. We keep talking about men's lack thereof or overly emotional state. It could be a gun, knife, smack. It's hurting them and rippling into our society. Absolutely.
Right.
One of the big things that folks walked away with, Brother Larry, is that when Chris Rock said he was taught by his mother to never fight in front of white people. Does this situation, does this special put an end to this year-long feud? Does this kind of like, okay, you got the smack, I got the special, we done. Now we need to figure out how to, is this, as some will call it, one of my crew members say, call it a come to Jesus moment that we need at this point? Or do you think this is going to continue?
Well, I thought it was interesting that he used those choice of words to say, my mom taught me never to fight in front of white people. And I think sometimes we get a little too preoccupied with thinking of what they think of us. But at the same time, you know, we also are taught that, hey, you don't do certain things in front of mixed company. There are certain conversations that I'll have in the barbershop when it's just me and a bunch of black men talking that I would never say in front of other people. So I get that aspect of it. So that's a very nuanced thing. You can get offended by it and say, well, who are they that you have to watch, you know, but we all do it at some point. And for our own reasons, right? And some of it's called being on code. Like it's certain things that you do around us or around each other that we shouldn't do around them. And I'm sure they have a code as well. I'm sure they talk differently around each other than they do around us. And that should be expected and respected. But I think that was just an excuse and a good way to end where people can kind of relate to that, because we all kind of grew up with that kind of old sage advice where you just watch how you are because you're not only representing your family, you're representing the black race. And what that underscores is that as black people, we always have to mind what we do in front of the world, because we all basically have to bear the brunt for one person's mistake. A white boy can go into school, shoot up the school. That's one crazy ass white boy. But if a black person does something, then it's no, those black people are predisposed to criminality. Those black people are evil. Those black people are crazy. We don't necessarily have that individualism and get that past the way white people do.
Absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly, brother.
But the last point, because I didn't finish your point, was that I think if he just closes the chapter on this now, then that should be it. And I think he's intelligent enough to do that. I think that's why he went so hard, because he probably was thinking, okay, once I address this, I'm not going to say nothing else about it, and that's going to be it.
Well, he certainly showed a great deal of vulnerability and being honest with himself about everything from the size to the impact and all of those things. So I think that you're right there. I think he wanted to go Nas and Ether, do an Ether situation.
Right.
Let it all out.
Right.
It's dead. It's dead. And then we might see them reconnect. I don't know. They might stand on stage at some point. It will be a beautiful show of reconciliation. We don't know. It may happen. It may not happen. But we've seen both sides. At this point, I think the culture could say, all right, it's dead. It's done.
Right. Right. We had enough of this.
We had enough of this. I don't want to talk about this shit no more, bro.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, it's another high class version of black on black crime, really.
And the Oscars are this weekend. Will just got another award. He got an award this past weekend. It's so funny. And I know Chris Rock knew this. He's like, Will get an award on Saturday night. I'm dropping my Netflix special on Saturday night from his wife's hometown.
Right, right. So let's hope this is it.
I hope so. I hope so. Brother Larry, how can folks find out the great work that you're doing on stage, bro?
Well, I host a comedy night in Baltimore every Wednesday at 8:30 at a really nice venue called the Avenue Kitchen. And for bookings, you can reach out to Julie King, 410-917-3048. And you can find me as Larry Lancaster on all social media platforms.
There it is, my brother Larry Lancaster, dynamic comic and even greater brother. Thank you so much, bro, for being so good for the culture and checking us out and bringing your expertise to the conversation. Trust and believe. I'm done talking about this, Larry. So thank you for putting an end to it.
Thank you, Farajii, and I'm very proud of the work you're doing, brother. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, bro. Appreciate and love you. My man, Larry Lancaster, checking in today. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. I thank each and every one of you for being a part of the conversation. I want to thank my team, Keenan, Joel, Ariel. I want to thank my control room. And, of course, I want to thank all of you crew members for being a part of the conversation. Make sure you do your due diligence. Make sure you do your due part in supporting us here at Black Star Network. Go to our website today at blackstarnetwork.com. Support us financially. Share the content. Download the app for free on all your devices. And follow us on all social media platforms at blackstarnetwork.com. We would love the Black Star Network on Instagram and Twitter. We would love to connect with you. And you can also follow me on Instagram at The Real Farajii and Farajii on Twitter as well. As always, to make sure y'all stay tuned. Up next is RMU, Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like I always say, folks, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Have a great afternoon and evening, and talk to you soon. Peace.